Welcome to the Deep Bass Podcast, where we take a hard look at the element that makes or breaks games, the music. I'm Peter Thomas, and I'm joined by my co-host, Cody Haltom. We are happy to have you along with us on our journey through Final Fantasy XIII. What's going on, Cody?
It feels like episode 1 all over again.
Why episode 1?
Because we're talking about Final Fantasy again. You know, we've covered a couple of Donkey Kongs, a couple of Zeldas. So yeah, it just feels like episode 1 again to me.
It's been a while since we've touched Final Fantasy, for sure. When we talked about doing this episode, we reached out and we got somebody who is very interested. I'd like to welcome Corbin Rogers. What's going on, Corbin?
Nothing much. You guys wanted me to talk about this game, and if you told me 10 years after it came out, I'd be making a podcast for it, I would say you're crazy.
Yeah, this is one of those games where I think when it first launched, everybody despised it. And then it kind of gradually grew on people. And a lot of people liken it to Final Fantasy X for that very reason.
I think when it first did come out, it was Square Enix's first actual game on the 360 and PlayStation 3. So I know that people had a lot of anticipation for it, and it didn't really match up to what the Final Fantasy usually was. So it definitely got its fair share of shakes.
Yeah, but I'm looking forward to it. This was a big soundtrack and one that had quite a few different elements. I was nervous when we first talked about doing it because it had been so long since I beat it, but I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to match these songs with where they are in the game anymore. It's been ages.
Yeah, this isn't necessarily a game that I played through multiple times. So I'm like you, where listening to this, I was like, where does this take place? You know, there were a couple of places where I'm like, oh, I know what this is. But for the most part, it was almost like a blind listen. So I'm glad Corbin's here, who hopefully knows more than both of us combined, because if not, we're screwed.
Yeah, it was definitely one that was a lot more linear and it's much more forgettable. However, once you actually get into the game more and you pay attention to the characters and the music, you do see yourself going back to listen to a song here and there, or even looking at a storyline.
Yeah, definitely. So we're going to start off with the game history as we always do, and then we'll get into our personal memories here. Final Fantasy XIII is a science fantasy role-playing video game developed and published by Square Enix for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 consoles, and later for Microsoft Windows operating system. Released in Japan in December of 2009 and internationally in March of 2010, it is the 13th title, surprise, surprise, in the mainline Final Fantasy series. This game takes place in a fictional floating world of Cocoon, whose government, the Sanctum, is ordering a purge of civilians who have supposedly come into contact with Pulse, the much-feared world below. The former soldier, Lightning, begins her fight against the government in order to save her sister, who has been branded as an unwilling servant to a godlike being from Pulse, making her an enemy of Cocoon. Final Fantasy XIII received mostly positive reviews from video game publications, which praised the game's graphics, presentation, and battle system. The game's story received a mixed response from reviewers, and its linearity compared to previous games in the series was mostly criticized. Selling 1.7 million copies in Japan in 2009, Final Fantasy XIII became the fastest-selling title in the history of the series. I'm going to try really hard with the composer's name here, but Masashi Hamauzu composed the game's soundtrack. His previous work on the series was as a co-composer for the Final Fantasy X game and as the main composer for Dirge of Cerberus Final Fantasy VII. The game was the first main series Final Fantasy game to not include any compositions by original series composer Nobuo Uematsu. The score features some pieces orchestrated by Yoshihisa Hirano, Toshiyuki Umori, and Kunihito Shiina with the Warsaw Philharmonic Orchestra. I'm so bad with the Japanese names. The song My Hands from British singer Leona Lewis's second album, Echo, was chosen to replace the Final Fantasy XIII's original theme song, Kimigara Irukara, by Sayuri Sugawara for the game's international release. And man, was that a mouthful. Wow.
Well, I can say you
Right.
definitely nailed a couple of them.
Okay, good. I'm not completely, what do they call American idiots in Japanese?
Americans.
Yeah, probably. So yeah, a lot of information there. I meant to go back and pare some of that down, but honestly, I feel like all of it's pretty relevant. I think the biggest standout thing there is the fact that this is the first soundtrack that didn't have really any of Uematsu's hands on it, right? He might have had some oversight or something like that, but really, this was all Hamauzu's work.
I wonder what that is, though, because that seems like such a departure from what they used to do. I don't know if it was something in studio or a personal choice, but I mean, I'm not as versed as in all of the Final Fantasy games, and I'm learning about their soundtracks as we go through and do this show, obviously. But that just seems like a weird choice to me.
So I can kind of expound on that a little bit. And so at the time, the development of Final Fantasy XIV was going on, and that was their first iteration before Realm Reborn. And Nobuo Uematsu actually got tapped for that, and then Hamasu actually took up for 13.
Well, that checks out then. Okay, thank you.
That's interesting because I thought he had retired to do his own stuff with like the black mages and things like that. So he was actually working on 14 then.
Yeah, because Square was looking for the next iteration to be better than 11. So they're pushing that a lot more. That game, they wanted to have basically the A-listers on it.
Little did they know that poor 1.0 would never make it.
Yeah.
Something I did want to bring up that you had brought up in the history for this game was Leona Lewis, My Hands, because this game came out on 360 and that's where I got it, but we're getting there. And whenever this game came out, leading into it, I would watch the trailer over and over and over again. And this is what they used in all of their marketing. And if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, it's actually used at the end of the game as well. So when we got here, and to not see it on this soundtrack, I was so pissed because that was going to be my number one.
Yeah, I'm not sure why they didn't include it. I think just because the official soundtrack is from Japan, so they used the Japanese ending song. But I guess I probably should have told you that it would have been a-okay by me.
I can definitely say that after listening to My Hands a lot, which Leona Lewis has a beautiful voice, it really never actually clicked with Final Fantasy for me. So it was a nice song by itself, but like in my top five, I'm just like, all right, no, I'm gonna put this like I would have it like a 6 or 7 because there's so many other songs on this soundtrack that are better than that one.
It's just a song that, because I went through and dissected that trailer so many times, I heard it so many times. But I don't know. I just assumed that it would have been here. And Peter, the only reason why I didn't call it audible and do that was copyrights.
That is true. But I do have more to say about that as we get into our track list. So I'm going to table the rest of what I have to say for that for now. And I will talk a little bit more about that later. In the meantime, let's get into our memories. And as our guest, Corbin, we're going to go ahead and let you start us off. Tell me about your memories with Final Fantasy XIII.
My first actual memory of Final Fantasy 13 was pre-ordering the game. As we know, Final Fantasy was always a Sony exclusive, all the way from pretty much from what I think maybe the 6th one or 7th one, all the way up until 10, I believe. And this one coming on 360 was awesome for me because I literally had to choose between a PlayStation 3 or an Xbox 360 for Christmas, and I went with a 360. So my first time actually getting this game, I had put actually about 34 hours into it within about 2 or 3 days, which was a lot considering at the time of the game I was in my undergrad years. And also too, I felt I really connected with some of the characters as well versus earlier Final Fantasy games because I could kind of relate to Lightning's story in that place and time in my life.
Yeah, you mentioning the fact that this is the first time in a long time where this came off of PlayStation and or Sony rather and moved to another console. I had completely forgotten about that.
Yeah, and it was a day and date release too. It wasn't like a timed exclusive. It launched internationally at the same time, which was unique. I would have expected to see a timed exclusivity deal or something like that, but no, it didn't happen.
And I would say too, another thing that I actually remembered is I don't know if you guys actually played seven. So every single one, like seven was the first one on the PlayStation and had, oh my God, this is this big hard case of discs. And then 10 went to the PlayStation 2, like, wow, this is the first one. And then I believe this is the first one actually on that new generation of consoles. So it gave me that same feeling like, wow, this is their first foray into using a different game engine versus what they did before.
Yeah, this was their Crystal Tools engine or something like that that they used for this one, and it really showcases what they were working on and did really well with that. There was something I wanted to ask too. You had mentioned that Lightning was an amazing character, and you kind of liken yourself to her. How so?
So I'm the oldest of two. So her story with her sister Sarah, how she had to basically protect her because her actual original name was Claire, and she changed her name to Lightning to basically protect her. I really kind of connected with that, being the older sibling, and really having to figure out that I was away from home for the first time, and my brother was at home still going through like his teenage years. So that was something where I kind of felt like, wow, this character actually kind of I can kind of relate to it.
That's awesome. That's one of the things I really love about the Final Fantasy series is the characters do have something relatable about them. I don't think there's a single character that doesn't have some sort of human quality to them.
No, I think that's fair. And something else that you had said was that this was kind of the reason why, because I mean, you had played this on the Xbox, yes?
Yeah.
Okay, I thought I heard that right, but I just wanted to make sure. I already had an Xbox at this point. So, on the opposite side of things, because this was multi platform, I never got a PlayStation 3. This was going to be my reason to get a PlayStation 3, and then it went multi plat, and I was just like, huh, well, I'll just skip this generation then. And I haven't picked one up since.
Yeah.
All right, Cody, tell me about your history.
I'll never forget the day that this game came out. This came out the day that my niece was born. The night before, some friends and I were at a bar for a trivia night to celebrate me becoming an uncle. Around midnight, I checked in with my family, and it was going to be a long time before my niece was born. So, my buddy Andrew and I left and went to GameStop where I had pre ordered this game and picked it up. I was living at home at the time, and because I had the house to myself, we moved my 360 into the living room to get the quote unquote full experience of this game. Andrew loved 7, 8, 9, and 10, but he saw the combat in this game and he hasn't played a new Final Fantasy since. I never beat the game, however, I did make it to disc 3. I only played it once, and because of that, remember very little about this game.
There was a few things in there that I was noting as you were speaking, but the first thing was, of course, how special it was because I know how much you care about your niece.
Oh, yeah.
So just hearing that kind of warmed my heart. But when you had mentioned that you were only on, or you had gotten to disc 3, I was confused. And then I realized that the Xbox version was multi-disc because they fit everything onto the PlayStation 3 version since it was a Blu-ray and had quadruple the capacity of whatever Xbox was using at the time.
DVDs.
Were they still DVDs? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was, it threw me off. You were like, I was like, disc 3, are we talking about the same game here?
Yes, we are. And to put it into context, disc 3 is the open world segment.
Got it. Okay.
I do remember that.
Yeah. So it was interesting. Although I will say too, one of the things that when this game came out, I was still living with my parents, and I typically played all of my games in my basement on my little 32-inch TV. But anytime my parents would go out or something like that, I'd move one of my consoles up to the living room because they had a bigger TV. So I relate so hard to that quote unquote full experience you talked about.
Yeah, I mean, it's just what you did. And I mean, especially with like a new Final Fantasy game on a new system, how could you not? I probably would have tried to do it even if my parents were home, but oh well. All right, Peter, what about you? Tell us about your history.
So the story of me getting this game is not epic in any way. It has Final Fantasy in the title. So of course this was going to be a day one buy for me. And it was. I did end up getting the PS3 version. I was a hardcore Sony fan. I did have an Xbox here and there, but nothing that was ever substantial. I think I mostly had it for Fable, but I was really hyped the moment I saw the trailer for this game. I was with you on the hearing that song, Cody, over and over again. I was one of those people who, when trailers for games that I love came out, I would watch them consistently. And like you said, just dissect them and see the little tidbits and talk about them with people. Where my story kind of gets good is when we talk about playing it. At the time, my good friend Sean, who is known as Ian Gar throughout the web, he and I hung out a lot during this period. So I'd bring my PS3 over to his place and we'd play. We'd usually like hook up like two TVs side by side and we'd both play a game or something like that. I was at the cutscene before the final boss of the game, and all of a sudden my game just stops. The PS3 beeped a few times and I look down at it and I see this yellow light blinking on my PS3. Yep. You guessed it. My PS3 was a fat 60 gigabyte, fully backwards compatible PS3, shit the bed before the final boss fight, preventing me from beating this game for almost a year after I got there. Sean and I, when it first happened, we did open up the PS3 and we tried doing some surgery on it to get it working again, but there was no dice. So I ended up having to call Sony's tech line and they were like, well, it's $200 to get this repaired, or we'll sell you a newer slim model for, I think it was like 120. And at the time I was a poor college student who didn't make a whole lot of money. So I had to take the cheaper route, unfortunately. But yeah, it was a sad day in my life.
It's funny you say about your PlayStation 3 dying, because I remember with the Xbox 360, it also had its fair share of the red ring of death as well. But I do remember too, the biggest thing was the price. I think the PlayStation 3 at the time was $499 or $599, and the Xbox 360 was about $100 to $50 cheaper overall.
It was $599, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, especially the fully backwards compatible one, because of all the tech that they had in there and everything. It was a very, very expensive system. So needless to say, I was incredibly heartbroken when that, I mean, outside of the fact that I was at the boss, the final boss, and I couldn't beat it.
Oh God.
Yeah, it was one of those things where I picked it back up a year later. I did end up finishing it, thankfully, but it took me out of the moment. You know, when you're going through that grind and you get to the end, it feels very fulfilling. So I feel like I lost a little bit of that, having to wait almost a year before I got my replacement done.
Wait, that's how long it took to get you the replacement? It took a year?
No, that's how long it took me to decide on getting the replacement, because I really did not want to give up the fully backwards compatible one at all.
Naturally, yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely agree.
And, you know, looking back on it now, I regret it. I wish I still had that one, even though it weighed a ton and it was a massive system. I really do wish I still had it, but unfortunately, no luck. I still have my Slim from that replacement, still running like a champ, but wherever you are, long lost PS3, I miss you every day.
Pulling out for the PlayStation 3.
I was thinking.
Press F in chat.
Corbin, since I got you here and you're a fellow Xbox guy during that era, how many Xboxes did you go through due to Red Ring?
You know what? I got very fortunate. I bought one Xbox, and that was the only one that I ever had. It's currently being used as a DVD player by my father, and it still runs.
I hate you.
It's even the one, it's not the original one. Like, I know the top of it was the hard drive and it had like that metallic outside of it. It's the second iteration of it. So it still runs the fine, like just like it did when it came out of the box.
I went through 5 of those things and I don't regret it at all, because honestly, the 360 was a great system with its UI, and Microsoft was great with their response to the whole Red Ring situation, which sounds like it was a much better situation than what Peter went through.
Very quick question, an important question before we get into our lists here. Did you, Cody, bake your Xbox 360?
No, I didn't. But I did manage to buy a bunch of other broken 360s and void all the warranties and rebuilt it.
You Frankenstein it.
Wow.
I literally Frankensteined it. Yeah. And get this, guys, because I know nothing about electronics other than I'm a gamer. That's it. So I voided the warranty like 2 weeks before Microsoft had announced that you could just send it back in. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm screwed. So I got all the parts. I Frankensteined the console back together. It booted up. I could access Xbox Live. I could play DVDs. I could listen to CDs, but you put an Xbox 360 disc into it, and it would say, "This is an Xbox 360 game. Please insert this into an Xbox 360 console." So apart from having like a huge case of like identity crisis, that thing worked great, man.
That's amazing.
It took me like 6 months too. I was so bummed. But once again, that's like one of the most Cody things ever, where you go through all the work and then it just craps right there.
I honestly wish we were friends at that time because I would have loved to see that whole process.
I actually forgot that you could toss it and bake it. So as soon as you brought that up, I was like, wait, what?
Yeah,
And then I
wrap it in a towel and bake it.
Bake it.
Unreal.
All right. Without further ado, we will kick off our music list. We're going to go ahead and start us off. Corbin, go ahead and tell us what your number 5 is.
My number 5 is March of the Dreadnoughts. I really picked this one because if history shows with dreadnoughts from World War One, they were basically big, gigantic, full metal type like guns blazing, and in the game it was the exact same thing. So there was a boss with that fight as well, and those dreadnoughts, if you played the game, you remember that it was very hard to defeat them the first time around.
I don't remember this at all, which is not surprising. I kind of had a lot of other things going on in my life whenever this came out. So, like I said, my memories of the game are few and far between. When it comes to this track, I do appreciate the build-ups. This is 100% a march, and the drums are a dead giveaway for that. I do like this track, but it's way lighter than I expected it to be.
I said the same thing, Cody. You hear March of the Dreadnoughts and you think it's going to be something like you would hear in Command and Conquer Red Alert or something like that. And it comes on and it's completely different. The intro comes in with these bells and chimes, and it's like kind of hoppy and cheery and almost like something you would dance along to. But, you know, at that 21-second mark, when everything kind of kicks in and pulls the song together, it is incredibly refreshing to hear. This was actually on my list for a while at the number 5 spot as well, before I ended up taking it off and replacing it with my current pick, but it was on there for a good while. I couldn't remember though where this song took place, so I'm glad that you had that reference.
I definitely agree with both of you in your analysis of the song, because just listening it back through it again, those changes are abrupt and they do come at certain points, but I definitely do like that. throughout the song, and it still kind of kept me in the element of as I listened to it, but it also just kind of like brought up memories of playing the game.
All right, Cody, what is your number 5?
Uh, this is going to give me crap, and I know it. My number 5 is Hope's theme. I am so conflicted about my feelings on this track. When I first listened to this, I was between not liking it to thinking that it was just okay. After I did my first pass of the soundtrack, I watched a lot of videos of the gameplay to refresh myself since it's been so long. Coming back to this track afterwards makes me think that this track hits differently. I had to think. I remember hating Hope as a character. His mom dies at the start of the game, and he spends most of the game being a whiny, sad, angsty kid. He is such a frustrating character to me, and I never really enjoyed him. When I listened to this track, keeping all of that in mind, this is a great character track. The acoustic guitar is a welcome change. The first word that I would use to describe this track is somber. This isn't a happy track. It's in no way upbeat, and there isn't anything special about it. In other words, it's a perfect character track for Hope. I know this sounds like I'm just setting this up to be one big Hope joke, but that isn't the case at all. While I'm not a fan of the character and the track is just okay to me, I can't deny it's an almost perfect character theme.
I remember finding Hope incredibly whiny, and I'm so glad that you confirmed that he was, in fact, incredibly whiny. Of all of the characters, to me, his growth was by far the least satisfying. His story was the least rewarding and fulfilling throughout the entire game. And overall, just really despising Hope in general. Like, that's my entire memory of him. Where I do agree is that this theme matches his woe is me attitude. And there's no denying that the track itself is very beautiful. I imagine when I hear it in my head, some guy sitting on a rock in front of a campfire, like about to tell you his whole life story, weathered from time itself. But instead of getting that Aron type character who's going to tell you all of that history and lore of his life and journey getting up to that point, we're given Hope. And I don't mean the kind you look forward to when all else seems lost. We are given Hope, the character.
Oh my God. I thought I was going to get roasted for this, but I'm so glad that you at least agree with me on some levels about this character. God, I hated this little shit.
I agree. I think, especially with Hope, throughout the game, you really hate him because when you're first introduced to him, he, like you said, he's going through this teenage angst, which he is a teenager. But then also, too, he had a complicated relationship with his father, if you remember in the game. And the biggest thing is too is that he actually switched hair with lightning. So his silver hair was actually meant for lightning, but then when they changed her hair to pink, they gave him back his silver hair. I think the other thing too is if you actually play the sequel to this game, 13-2, his growth as a character is like night and day. In that game, I loved him. In 13, I hated him.
God, now I got to go play 13 too.
I refuse.
Yeah, I mean, it really was bad. And even with silver hair, I did forget about the troubles with his dad. It's basically like they gave him every single teenage trope that they could possibly throw into one character.
Yes.
And I think that's what made him so bad. It's like you would think that would give him more dimension, but it didn't. It made him so one dimensional and his drive through the game so one dimensional that I couldn't deal with him.
It also didn't help either that playing through the game, his best ability was a jack of all trades, but you could also put him in a healer role. But Vanille was much better at the healer role because of her gear versus him. So he was usually that guy on the sideline.
Yeah, he was never in my party.
No, if I had the choice to put him in or kick him out, he was never in there. And I mean, granted, he was still around for like the story arcs and that kind of thing, but I still hated him. I hated everything about this character. I'm going to choose my words not carefully here because it's me, but I have a feeling that there's going to be one person out there listening to this that absolutely loves Hope and is just absolutely hating us right now for all of this.
Too
Definitely.
bad.
Definitely.
We're right. You're wrong. Don't join the Discord to tell us otherwise. All right, Peter, what is your number 5?
My number 5 is, and I don't know how to pronounce this. I actually tried to Google it to see if I could get the right name. So forgive me if it's wrong, but it's Archlight.
Archlight.
Archlight. So that
Archlight step.
I thought it was Archlight, but the L and the Y are in the opposite spot. So it's almost like Archilty step.
No.
I don't know. Anyways, that's what it is. That's my number 5. As with most Final Fantasy games, the theme of Sarah is used a lot throughout these tracks. This track begins like it's going to kind of stick with that same route, but then it kind of switches it up on you and becomes this really cool, relaxing, almost floaty version of it. Given the area of the game is one of the few free roam areas pretty late, this track fits in very well with that. The flute is kind of what drives most of the song through and is supported by some great percussion that almost make it feel like you're exploring some old ruins of sorts. This is only amplified by how many of those little subquest relic things are floating around in this area of the map, mixed with some really prehistoric looking monsters. What's really interesting is that if they would have had a world map with an airship, this is the song that I would have actually imagined being played during that time.
When Peter says prehistoric monsters, he's talking about dinosaurs. All right, everyone, it's just dinosaurs walking around this area. This is exactly where I quit. I didn't hear this much, and honestly, I don't remember it. My first note about this was that I loved the drum rolls in this and how subtle they were. It's pleasant, and I can definitely hear this for an airship for sure, just like you said.
And I think this is actually, if I can remember, this game didn't have an airship. I think it was one of the add-ons of the characters that we actually flew on, but even then, that wasn't a cutscene. Like you say too, this was one of the first open parts of the game, and it came late, which is kind of sucky versus like Final Fantasy usual roaming around. And I remember the adamant toys, which for the people that haven't played this game, they're gigantic turtles that literally will stomp and kill you because you can't beat them at this point in the game. So just imagine that.
That's really weird. I mean, both of you beat the game, obviously, but even if you like run around and level up, you can't kill them.
No.
No.
No. Okay. Just straight no.
What I actually tried to do, because I remember at the time I literally was under leveled, but there was a way that you could do the paradigm shifts where you basically had to go into paladin and you basically tanked it, but you had to have Vanille's debuffs on it to kill it. It has damage over time. I actually did that once. It took close to 3 hours.
Yeah, I have a funny story because the Adamant Toys is going to get brought up in one of my songs later in the list, but I've got a funny story that I'm going to share about my experience with running into one of those for the first time. But yeah, it was very much like there was an Adamant Toys battle in Final Fantasy XV that took me close to that amount of time. I want to say it was like a 2-hour battle of fighting this thing. So it is very much I want to say it's a running joke at this point from Square Enix where they're just like, hey, let's just throw in this monster that's here and you can battle it anytime you want. But if you go too early, you're going to get fucked up.
Yep.
So normally we would get into Corbin, your number 4, but unfortunately your next 2 tracks are on our list a little later. So you're going to be taking a little bit of a sideline here on your picks, and we're going to move into Cody's number 4. So go ahead, Cody. Tell me what your number 4 is.
Lake, is it Brescia?
Yep.
All right, cool. The episode where no one knows how to pronounce anything. Got it. Well,
Right.
Lake Brescia. This track starts, and the first thing you hear is this energetic violin, followed quickly by some auxiliary percussion with the chimes. The violin almost makes you feel like you are in a race or being chased. There's just a certain energy to it, man. However, this is clearly an environmental track because of how broken up it gets. The tempo stays the same, but at certain points, the violin is missing, and it almost makes this track feel like it's slowing down in those moments. While the level looks like a snow or ice level, everything is actually all crystal. I think the chimes do a good job at adding to that somehow. However, it's the basic violins that attracts me to this track so much.
When I heard this song, I thought for a second there that it almost belonged in a Christmas musical. I was thinking about this track when I was listening to it, and I'm pretty sure this is where Snow ends up getting his Eidolon Shiva. I remember being a little bit confused because you're right. There's all these blue crystals around, and it does look like a snowy or wintry kind of landscape, but I'm fairly certain that there is no real snowy areas. So very, very interesting that the ice Eidolon and this track would show up. When I was listening to this song, it was out of all the tracks that we've listened to, the one that seemed the most quote unquote Final Fantasy.
I really agree with you, Peter. You bringing up the Christmas aspects of the song, it is the type of song that gives you that feeling. And this actually is a song that was playing when Snow gets his Eidolon. I actually remember that fight too. So I can really agree that it does give that Christmassy feel. However, I think it's the only part in the time of the game where snow is even shown.
The one thing that I almost put in my notes, and I'll see how you guys feel about this, the chimes that are in this. I almost feel like they should have been handbells instead, but do you think that it would have made this track a little bit too heavy or a little bit too weighty? Or am I just being way too much of a percussion nerd right now?
No, I agree. I think that the bells probably, I mean, outside of giving it even more of a Christmassy vibe than I had already gotten from it, I don't feel like the using bells would have been as delicate as these crystals make things look, if that makes sense.
I kind of agree with that too. If you were to do that swap, it would make the track a little bit better, in my opinion.
All right, so we got column A and column B. Got it. I think what I'm trying to say is I think that as a standalone track, the handbells would have been a lot better, but I think within the context of the game, it kind of has to be where it is. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yep.
All right, cool. Peter, tell me about number 4, and please tell me you can pronounce it.
I can pronounce this one. It's pretty straightforward. My number 4 is the Gapper Whitewood. I've only beaten Final Fantasy XIII once, and it was quite a long time ago at this point, so I don't really recall this particular area in my mind, but I do remember loving the track then, and after listening to this soundtrack again, I love it now. I can't make a lick of sense out of the strange vocals that appear in this track, but it adds a lot to the song that you don't hear much in the others, if any at all, really. For my friends and fans of Phantasy Star Online, the way the drums and the piano go together in this, it reminds me so much of a track being played on the planet Rhaegal after disembarking the Pioneer 2. And I apologize to you guys if you've never played Phantasy Star, but somebody out there is going to know this and love me for it.
Peter, all 3 people who played that game really appreciate
3? Come on, that's a little rough.
You're right, 4. The vocals add so much to this entire soundtrack. In this track, they are prominent and I love it. They are what make me want to continue to listen to this track. They are so beautiful. I don't know where this takes place either, but honestly, I don't need to because this track is just great by itself.
I actually can't remember where it comes up either.
Oh, great. It's not just me.
Yeah. I can say though too, I agree that the vocals definitely wrap the track up and make it a lot better than it is. But if you take those vocals away, this track really reminds me of if you're sitting in an elevator and you're going up, it reminds me of elevator music.
Is that a good or a bad thing?
Yeah. It's wanting to put me to sleep. It's it's a very calming song, but it's like, it's one of those where you're listening to it, and if you close your eyes, you can fall asleep to it. I think that's just the light airiness of it.
It's definitely very dreamlike for sure.
I would have to listen to it again and like pay attention and try to take the vocals out. But man, that would be hard to do. Like, I don't want to do it, because the vocals are so good.
All right, Corbin, we're going to sideline you just for one more track here and go to Cody's number 3.
Speaking of relaxing tracks, my number 3 is Dust to Dust. This is such a relaxing song. We've listened to tracks that will put me to sleep, but this one actually relaxes me when I hear it. I know we have called these tracks meditative in the past, but in this case, it's literal. Work and life has been super stressful for me, and I could feel some of that melt away as I listened to this. I don't know where this track takes place or what is happening. Judging by where it is on the soundtrack, I know it's late game, but I never got this far, I don't think. I am curious as to what's happening, though, because this track is more soothing than it should be for such a fast-paced game. If you need a track just to zen out to, this should be an easy go-to for anyone.
Yeah, I agreed with you on this track being incredibly peaceful. I almost got the temple vibes similar to the prayer songs from Final Fantasy X, but a little less imposing. The slower nature of this song gives it a very dreamlike state. And I could definitely see someone using this as their, what did Brooklyn call it? A sleep song?
Yeah, I think that's what she called it because we were all confused. Like, huh?
Yeah. One of those. I wish I wasn't so far removed from the game because I'd love to know where this actually took place. If I had to take a guess, it sounds like something that would be in like a story area, but I'm just not sure.
I can definitely agree with that too. The vocals kind of start around the 20-second mark, and it's really like very soothing. It kind of puts you to sleep, kind of like the previous check that we just talked about. I could definitely agree with both your analysis on this song, and it's spot on.
It was really weird to listen to this because it does exactly what I said. Just where other tracks would make me tired or I could just mentally relax to them, this is like a physical relaxation where I can just be like, like a nice exhale. It was the weirdest thing to listen to.
I'd like to add too, as Peter said in the production of this, there's so many songs. This one actually was at number 6, and that was after listening to it again. And it's just like, wow, this kind of stuck out this time versus the original time I actually played the game.
Dear God, how long is your list?
this is definitely in the top 10 at least.
Oh, well, that's good to hear.
It does help that this is easily one of my top 5 games, which I know I will get hate for anybody listening to this, but I will stick by that.
No, no, trust me. I have hotter takes that we haven't revealed yet. So you're going to be just fine. Trust me.
And some we have, Mr. I don't play any Super Nintendo games.
Bitch, listen. All right, Peter, what is your number 3?
My number 3 is Vanille's theme. Character tracks in Final Fantasy, or really in any Square Enix RPG, are always a treat. I don't know how to explain it, but the music has always had a way of capturing an emotion for me. And Final Fantasy XIII is just riddled with emotions. Boyfriend saving girlfriend, siblings saving siblings, fathers saving sons, you name it. Vanille and Fang are different. They're sort of their own characters with their own experiences, but they're polar opposites of one another. Fang is tired, weary from the knowledge of life, and not a shred of naivety left in her body whatsoever. Vanille, however, says her answer to every problem that she has in life is just to run from it. Obviously, not a lesson that you want to teach anyone. This song dances around that playfulness and almost childlike mind that she has. Even the way the character model runs is vastly different than any other character in the game. Whenever I hear her song, or this song rather, I see a little girl sitting on the floor of her room playing with her toys, unafflicted by the pains and harsh reality of life.
I love Vanille. This track does a good job of being exactly like her, and I mean, you nailed it. Vanille is this beam of innocence in what is otherwise a really dark story. It's almost like ignorance is bliss is her mantra. It's rare, but I love that this track is only piano. It makes it such a more simple track, and I think it's perfect for her character.
I really agree with both of you. It's actually a funny fact with this. Vanilla is actually going to be the original main character of the game, but in production, they actually switched to Lightning. And her light, carefree attitude really is cool until you see her age. She's actually 190 years old. And if you've played the game, you know that Fang and Vanilla have been around for a very long time before. As Peter said too, I can kind of see the contrast with Vanilla and Fang, and their relationship is pretty complicated throughout the game, and then also culminates towards the end of the game. If you, spoiler alert, know that. But also too, she kind of Fang reminds me of Vincent from Seven, so their dynamic kind of changes, and the song definitely portrays Vanille's personality throughout the game.
I remember the hints and things that they leave you that Fang and Vanille know a lot more about what's going on than the rest of the cast do. I do not remember that her age was that high.
Yeah.
I did, but the only reason why was I was doing research on the Leona Lewis My Hands thing where I was trying to figure out, is this actually in the game or not? And I also did a couple of watches of gameplay for this and some playthroughs. And I swear I'm going to need like a flow chart or something like that to actually understand the story of this game, but that's for another time.
We're finally bringing you off the bench, Corbin. You're going to get out there and play this game.
All right.
Let's hear what your number 2 is.
My number two, and if I'm going to try to say it again, it's been a while, Kimi ga Irakara, and it's a long version. Interesting enough, this is Sayuri's second debut song, which is amazing in its own right. And her voice actually reminds me of Fakio Yoshioka, who's part of the Ikemono Gakari band. And if you've ever watched Naruto, she actually sings the Bluebird song. I believe that's the third opening of that anime. Here with this song at the beginning of it, it really kind of drops around the 30-second mark. And this is also because this is the big main song of it, her voice throughout the entire song is beautiful. The song is actually 6 minutes and 22 seconds long, but it doesn't feel that way.
Although I didn't understand a word of it, I like this track. I didn't have time to look up the lyrics, but honestly, I don't need to understand and recognize that she has a great voice. I like this track, but unfortunately, it's one of those tracks that you like, but you can't articulate as to why, though. We have those all the time, and it's frustrating as hell. I like it, but I just can't articulate as to why.
Before I talk about the track itself, let's start with the biggest question, which is something we talked about earlier. Western audiences out here got My Hands by Leona Lewis instead of this track. Do you guys feel like that was a good decision or not after hearing this?
I know my answer, and I think I know Corbin's answer, but I would have rather had My Hands personally.
I am going to fully disagree with Cody, and I would love this song to be that. I feel they needed more exposure for this game to a wider audience. But if you really pay attention to the lyrics, which at the time I was taking Japanese and still keeping up with it, they're very similar to My Hands. However, I really thought My Hands kind of didn't feel Final Fantasy enough for me. And despite Leona Lewis's best attempts, I was just kind of like, no. And it doesn't help that Final Fantasy is based in Japanese lore usually. And that connects me with that song more versus something that would be like North American based.
Okay, so we've got Corbin who says, no, keep the Japanese. We've got Cody who says, yes, keep Leona Lewis. My hot take on this track is that I think both of them should be dumped in the trash.
Well, I'm done. I'm done. This podcast's over.
All right, let me explain. On a personal note, I really love Japanese ballads a lot. Ever since I started listening to J-pop through Utada, who is basically a lot of people's entry into J-pop in general, Utada really solidified my love for these types of songs, and she does them very well. The track itself falls right in line with that feeling, and I love it. I love it as a standalone track. I would buy this album for this song, period. Looking at the lyrics, though, I feel that this one is less fitting because it speaks more along the lines of losing the person that you love, which, spoiler alert, we know doesn't happen. It's a beautiful song when you don't understand it, but it doesn't really fit in for the Snow and Sarah vibe. It does, however, fit for Vanille and Fang, which, now that we know, was originally where this game was intended to be kind of centered around. If it was meant to be for them, then this is a perfect pick. Leona Lewis's song is exactly the same way. It doesn't fit if you listen to the lyrics. And it's arguably worse because it sounds like Leona is singing like she's happy to be without this person in her life. So I could be just missing the message. You know, if the Japanese to English translation was incredibly literal, sometimes that can really mess up the meaning of certain things, as opposed to somebody from Japan telling me that this is what was intended by these words, not necessarily what came out of it. But that was just my vibe. So to me, neither song really fits what you get in the game, but the song itself as a standalone track, I think, is gorgeous.
All right, my turn to get off the bench here. Quick question before I do, though, and this is going to make me sound really dumb, but I am really dumb, so don't worry about it. Utada, did she do Simple and Clean?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Now I can connect. The reason why I prefer the Leona Lewis track more, and this is a hot take and just my opinion, I think she has a better voice if we were comparing these two tracks. And that's pretty much the only reason. I mean, they're both fantastic. And now that I have that touchdown, I love Simple and Clean. And I love two of the Kingdom Hearts games, being Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2. So I do know her, and she can sing in English really well as well. I mean, she has a great voice, but while I respect the artist on it, I still feel like My Hands is just better. I will say to you both that I do completely agree that it does not fit in this game, but I don't necessarily know if it was designed to. Whenever you watch the trailer, like we've talked about all of us doing, it says the name of the song, My Hands by Leona Lewis, and then it says from the album and whatever the album name is. So I don't know if this was made specifically for this game, or if they were just buddies and just teamed up and was like, hey, can we put one of your songs in Final Fantasy? And she was like, yeah, sure, use this one. Okay. And then just put it in there.
I will say that your opinion about the way that they sound is definitely a hot take, because I will fight and die for every Japanese J-pop artist out there. They, to me, sound head and shoulders above most American singers.
I agree with that too. I think, but I also think, Peter, agreeing with you, I think if we both spoke Japanese and we could understand it, I think maybe those songs might actually hit differently. Maybe because we can't understand it,
100%.
see it in a different way.
Yes, yeah. I agree fully to that.
Yeah, I can't understand it because I don't speak the language and I'm dumb and I've never tried. And I'm not saying this is a bad track or that she doesn't have a good voice. I'm saying that she does, but for me, this isn't music that if I'm driving somewhere or doing pretty much anything, this isn't going to be a go-to for me. That's just my own personal preference, but it doesn't take away from the fact that this track is as good as it is.
I will say though, the background vocals of My Hands are very good. Like the background sound of it is good. It's like, I guess it's the lyrics that just doesn't match, but the song itself, as pretty as it is, really, really nice.
Oh yeah.
Hey Peter, what's your number 2?
My number 2 is The Sunless Waterscape. There is a lot going on in this game when this particular point hits. Up until now, the progression has been fairly linear, but despite having not played in a long time, this stands out because it happens right at chapter 11. And that's when you first get kind of the inkling of being able to free roam through the environment a little bit. So when you get into this area, you're kind of out in this big, massive open field and finding out about these new stones that give you like side missions and stuff. And you're trying desperately not to get into a battle with this adamantoise that one hit kills your entire party with a single stomp. I know we talked about that earlier, so I have a quick story for that. The first time I got here, I was blown away by the openness and the breadth of what was out there and seeing all these kind of creatures just moving around in almost like a natural environment. It felt a lot like Jurassic Park, right? When they see all the dinosaurs for the first time, living, breathing, walking, and Dr. Grant is just completely fascinated by it. That's how I felt when I saw this area. Wandering around, looking at all the different things, fighting different enemies and stuff like that to fill up the codex. And I ran into the adamantoise and I saw it and I knew it was massive and everything. And I'm like, what is this thing? I remember attacking it a few times and seeing that it really wasn't doing a whole lot of damage. And then it lifts its leg ever so slightly. I'm not kidding you. It can't be more than like 6 inches off the ground, and then just pushes it down on the ground. And I watched my entire party fall flat. I just lost my shit laughing because I could not believe what had just happened. And I was so grateful that I saved before I did that because, oh man, what a nightmare that would have been to go through that again. This song just feels like new discoveries to me. And with that feeling, this song really matches that tone completely.
I agree with you, Peter. I think when you first get into this area of the game, this is pretty much what Final Fantasy fans wanted 13 to be, an open world game. And I felt if they went with this area and it was the entire game, this game would have been much well received. But along with this song, it's such a pretty song overall. You got typical beat behind the violins, give it a peppy feeling. It really made me want to physically skip somewhere. And then around the one mark, the vocals begin and it raises the song to a bit higher echelon. I really like the piano on this track as well. And if you knew the keys, you could simply just play this on the piano and find it, and you get the same sound, which was really cool. I felt the track was one where you could say, who made this song, Uematsu or Hamauzu? And most people would go with Uematsu, which shows the bias that fans usually have along with the songs. And also, I'll kind of expound on that later as a hot take.
This also falls on your list. Where exactly does it fall?
This is my number 4 track. I actually originally had this at number, I believe, 3, but this one is definitely one where I feel if somebody hasn't played Final Fantasy 13 out there, just listen to this track. It definitely encompasses a lot. And if you do like this track, give the game a shot.
Peter, I really like the Jurassic Park reference because you are absolutely right on that. When it comes to the different composers, I couldn't tell you the difference because I'm not super familiar with all their works yet. I didn't even pay attention to the violin until you had mentioned it. I love that some of these tracks have lyrics because it's so rare in video game soundtracks. This is a beautiful track for sure.
I can't believe in my entire description I forgot to mention the damn lyrics.
Oh, yeah.
That was my bad. Yeah, the lyrics in it add a nice little touch. I forgot completely to mention that because I'm very enamored by this song, and I'm not really sure why, but just something about it. It's like breathing in a breath of fresh air, both literally and figuratively, as you get to this new part of the game that changes the direction a little bit. You go from pretty much a game that's almost on rails for how you navigate through to, hey, you've got these side missions. You can do what you want with them. You can continue on with the story, or you can get squashed by an Anabantoise, whatever floats your boat.
It does help too that this is a part of the game where you're going to be doing that typical Final Fantasy grind, and you're going to be there for hours on end. And it's a testament to how good the song is that I had literally had to level your characters up so much. I had put at least 30 hours into this area alone simply just to make sure I could beat a boss, and I still like the song.
All right, Cody, what is your number 2?
My number 2 is Snow's theme. This is such a nostalgia track to me. Not because it brings back memories from the game, but more the kind of music I used to listen to back in the day. This is just an electric drum kit, some electric guitar, and bass. Despite it only being those 3 things, I wish the electric guitar was more pronounced in a way. It's hard to describe. This track is quaint if you compare it to my pick of Otherworld from episode 1. Despite being much lighter, this is still very much a Cody track that I could listen to over and over.
This song is also on my list, and it comes in as my number 1. I've mentioned a few times that a lot of the gaming music that I listen to, I will jam out to in my car. Snow's theme is a must play anytime I'm driving. I actually use this track as a litmus test to see how good the bass is in my car, because if you turn up the bass and put this song on, it will rattle your chest in the right conditions. Snow doesn't use a weapon in this game. He just punches everything. His Eidolon is Shiva, who is represented by a motorcycle in her Gestalt mode. And I just want to know, is there anything more badass than a guy riding a motorcycle, punching things to kill them, and listening to this track? I think not. This song sounds like the opening track to the concert of the best rock band of your life. The heavy notes, the deep bass, and that electric guitar shredding gives me chills every time I hear it.
This song actually didn't make my list, but I really agree with both of you on it. I think the reason why I didn't like this song was kind of I didn't like Snow's character to begin with. He just kind of came as like brawn with no brains, and I'm just like, all right, you're a moron. But the part at about 46 seconds into the song, I do appreciate the guitar riffs. I'm not a big metal person, but I can understand why Peter would use this in his car and also why Cody would connect with the track. But for the most part of this song, it was, for me, honestly, it was just kind of forgettable. And I do remember too, from if you've played Final Fantasy VII, his character reminds me a lot of Barrett, and that they're both physical characters.
Yeah, just a lot less attitude with Snow.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, personally, I love Snow, but I am biased because the voice actor for Snow is Troy Baker, and he is a phenomenal voice actor. And it doesn't necessarily show in this game, but overall, he's just like a really good guy. But forgettable? Come on, this is such a good track. I can understand it not being for you, but it's all right. I don't remember most of this game, so pot meat kettle.
I think that's really just me. And like, I like how you bring up Troy Baker. So like other games, like if like I think he was the voice for BioShock Infinite as well. And then he also did work on Bleach, Dragon Ball Z, Full Metal Alchemist, etc. And like his voice is there, and it's like it's good. His lines in the game are also good as well.
Yeah, the only other voice actor that I know that's actually in this is Claudia Black, who voices Fang. And ironically enough, I know them both from the Uncharted series.
All right, Cody, what is your number one?
My number one is Eternal Love. This is my favorite moment in the game. This may come as a shock to some, but I'm a huge hopeless romantic at heart. In the game, Snow finds Sarah on a dock overlooking a dome filled with fireworks. She's worried about being able to see, having to tell Lightning the news, and worried about her own future. Snow does his best to assure her that everything will be okay, but fails predictably. So he presents a necklace to her and asks her to marry him, and she says yes. Just after that, they are riding around on Snow's air bike through and around these fireworks. Despite almost being blown up, literally, there's a moment of beautiful peace between them, and this is what plays during that scene. Yeah, the lyrics in English are a bit cringy, but it's just a beautifully animated moment of love and uncertainty. What can I say? I'm a sap for scenes like this.
あなたとの愛がこのままずっと続きますように夜空に願うのこの手はまだ離せない
All Corbin, this fell on your list as well, right?
Yeah, it did. So, as I said before, for Kimi ga Rikara, this is a series. It's one of her first songs, I believe, and it's very similar to other Japanese singers like Kodakumi or Utada Hikaru. And does anybody remember A Thousand Words from Ten Two from Kodakumi? It's the exact same vibes. I get chills listening to the song every single time. And I actually remember when you guys approached me for this podcast for this specific game, this was the song that came to my mind. And around the 1/32nd of this song is by far probably the most beautiful part of this entire soundtrack for me.
I find it interesting that there's been a few times where Cody has said that before, where we talk about a game that we're going to cover and there's like a specific song that comes to mind for him, or in this case, this was the song that came to mind for you, Corbin. But in all of those scenarios, they never land up at the top. It's not like the number one song, despite knowing it. So for you, this one landed at number 3, and Cody has talked about other ones that have landed between like 2 and 5, somewhere along that lines, but it's never the number one. I find that very interesting.
Yeah, typically I like to do a soundtrack in one sitting, and everyone knows that. I've been frank about that. This one, because of how long it is, not in terms of track length, but how long each track actually is, I've had to work on this since like Christmas. So listening to a couple songs here, a couple songs there, I always remembered this part of the game. And I always have been a sap for scenes like this. Going back and watching it, it's just so well done. And throughout all the moments of this game, this is the one memory that really sticks out. I remember this scene in detail because I was just amazed at how well it was presented, both in terms of visually, but also in terms of how they did animate it and how it came across. They wouldn't have been able to do that on the PlayStation 2 with Final Fantasy X. They tried, but it just never happened. So to see it actually conveyed with a proper light in this game, it just gave me chills to see.
I agree with that. I think how you say, Cody, with how they couldn't do with 10 with the limitations of PlayStation 2. I think they took that and they really learned of those limitations. And because of the new hardware, the 360 and PlayStation 3, they excelled on it and they pushed it more. And I really think the pros of the music from that Final Fantasy really translated to this specific song. Because if you told me this song wasn't attached to Final Fantasy at all, I would still think it would be in some way. Like this has to be a Final Fantasy track
Yeah.
at some point.
When I saw this on your list, Corbin, I was actually really surprised that you put one of the lyrical tracks on here, let alone 2 of them. Cody, for you, I really wasn't surprised at all, just given how heavily you favored some of the vocal tracks in Persona 5. And in our Celeste episode, you picked the one track that had vocals.
It's a rare thing in video games, okay?
Yeah. No, I agree. We haven't done a song with lyrics this prominent in a while. So this gave me a chance to do some digging up on the translation for this track as well. So when I did read them, I felt like the lyrics were actually fitting for this one, unlike how they were for your number 2, Corbin. The way I read these lyrics, it sounded very much like, in this case, a woman singing for her significant other who knows that they won't see each other for a while, either after being separated or on the verge of being separated, and really just reminiscing about all the things that made their love special and how she took that for granted, and if given the chance, wouldn't do that again. But thematically, this song, it was really spot on for what was happening in the game. So Cody, love that it's your number 1. Corbin, surprised it's on your list as number 3, but again, appreciate that it's there regardless. Sayuri Sugawara's voice is majestic.
Yeah. I mean, I actually appreciate what you just said too, because the one little small tidbit I want to put in here was that Leona Lewis, that actually did My Hands, as we already expounded upon, she actually wanted to make sure that her version of the song didn't overshadow this one. So that was nice little tidbit that she actually listened to this song before and she said, wow, this is actually really good. And she actually wanted this to go concurrently with My Hands for the North American release.
That's awesome. I'm glad that she would check with that, because I feel like this is by far of the two vocal tracks we've talked about today. This one is the stronger of the two.
I would obviously agree.
Right. All right, Corbin, you're going to be bringing us home today. What is your number one?
My number one is Lightning's theme. So, as we all know, and we've all played this game, and if you've seen the cover, Lightning's on the cover. She's the protagonist of this story. She really reminds me of a lot of Cloud, except in a female version. But with this song, the piano that Hamauzu puts in at the 122 mark is immaculate. And I really, really, really would love to hear this with the full orchestra behind it. So, as we all know, they do have that full orchestra for the Final Fantasy music. And obviously, this is taking place with COVID, but if they start to do that more, this is one of those tracks where I really would like to see a live rendition.
As I said about my number one on episode 1, that piano is everything. I love the build up to it though as well. We hear this theme all over this soundtrack, as we rightfully should. I hate how short it is and that you hear that piano part only once. That is so unfair, because that bit makes this track for me. Maybe because it's used in so many other places. I don't know. I'm not sure why, but I honestly don't care. I love this track.
Yeah, again, I have to mention how well the composers of the Final Fantasy games across the board just capture character essence in their tracks so well. The astounding part of this is how sad and heartbreaking the start of this is until that build up and shift at that minute and 20-second mark. This track really demonstrates the sophistication and elegance of Lightning and the range of her emotions you feel listening to it, to run parallel to the range of emotions that I can only imagine that she's feeling throughout this journey. You could have put any song here and it would have been better than Cody picking Hope's theme, but we aren't judging.
Hey.
I'm just kidding. I'm totally judging so damn hard.
I hate you.
Well, that is it for our list, guys. We made it through.
I did want to say too, we really touched on a lot of the nails music and a lot of lightning, and then also snow as well. But we never brought up like saws at all.
I know. And the funny thing about that is that his character track is one of my favorites. And I wanted to put it on so badly, but I couldn't find anything I wanted to take off more. It was a tough one.
He's the one with the chocobo in the hair, right?
That's him.
Correct. Yep.
I love that character. I love the chocobo, but that track was just no. I didn't want anything to do with that. That's the really jazzy one, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I did almost pick it just so we could talk about it, just because it seemed so out of place for what I know and remember of the character, and also just for the game. It just seemed really left field.
I fully agree. I don't think his theme really fits his character. And even through my whole entire of like literally listening to the entire soundtrack, this theme actually reminds me of Cowboy Bebop, and that is very jazzy. And if you're familiar with that anime, it's literally jazz. So it definitely doesn't really connect with this character, because I remember this character trajectory was kind of a little bit iffy. I know his son got taken away and he was trying to get his son back. And I think the chocobo was a gift to his son, and the chocobo
That's right.
ended up staying with him. So, but I definitely feel like his character kind of actually for me as an African American, I never connected with it. Like I just kind of looked at it, I'm like, okay, I see a fro. Okay, that's a stereotype. And then like it's just like really weird. I'm like, okay, yeah, I don't like this guy.
That is one thing I will note about these games. And one of the things it's painful is just how uneducated these game developers are, that they just throw in these tropes and things that they think fit with these people. So Saz is your token black character. So we're going to give him a fro that the Chickabo hides in, and we're going to make his song jazzier than the rest that doesn't really fit in with the rest of it. You know, as much as I love the song, you're right. It does not really gravitate towards that character and his story and what he's going through and things like that. It just, doesn't fit.
Not at all.
Not just that, but the overall tone and setting of the game. It's just so off-putting. It's one of those that I was listening to the soundtrack and it came on and I did a really quick just the fuck, just because of how out of place it is. It just doesn't make sense.
The funny thing too, and a small little note that I had on this, is that he has the most dialogue in the entire game.
Really?
Yes, he has the most dialogue. So you would think if a character has the most dialogue, he's going to have a better theme. But I think with that, I'm not sure what. I think that's really one of the biggest missteps of this game, and can kind of be really off-putting to people that are going in it with some type of expectation. So there's another song actually on this album. When you get to the side game of the Chocobo races, it's called Chocobo the Pulse, and that theme is very, very similar to Saz's theme. So I think that's where they were going with it. But if you don't know that going into listening to this theme and connect that to the Chocobo, it's gonna be off-putting to you.
That's right. That one was the very sax heavy Chocobo theme.
Yeah. Which is actually very good, in my opinion.
Yeah, it was excellent.
Yeah, because there are two Chocobo tracks, both of them almost made the list, but I can't think of a Chocobo theme and not think of Final Fantasy XV and Prompto. So I just couldn't. But that is a completely different conversation for a completely different time. But yes, that is going on my list on that episode. So spoilers.
All right. And with that, we are going to move to our question of the episode. And thankfully, Corbin was able to provide us with one because I was ill prepared and didn't have one. But the question that's going out to everybody this time is, where does Final Fantasy XIII fall in your top favorite Final Fantasies and why? Or if it's not in your top Final Fantasies, why not? And Corbin, we'll go ahead and let you start with this one since it was your question.
I am going to say to everybody that's listening to this that plays Final Fantasy, I know the reason why you hate this one is because it's linear, and it also because you can't go into a place where you will get lost if you did a save and you don't know where you're at. For myself, this is probably, I'd say, my third or fourth, with my first obviously being 7, and then my second one being 6, and then my third most likely being Final Fantasy 11. But I definitely feel with this one, the character design was good. The art style was amazing. The only drawback of it was the fact that it was linear. And I definitely feel that if it wasn't as linear and it was kind of something that a lot of Final Fantasy fans were used to, this could easily be the top 5 for pretty much everybody. One of the biggest polarizing opinions that I have with this game is that the music style is perfect. So a lot of people will say, we want Nobu for our music. We want Nobu for our music. Well, if you take one of his songs and you take one of Masashi's songs and you take the names off of them, you may not know the difference between the two. And that kind of shows how good this game's music was. But then also, too, if the game wasn't as linear, maybe you're going to look at the game in a different light.
Where does this fall for you, Cody?
Predictably not too high. This is third from the bottom for me in terms of my overall favorite Final Fantasy. When I say that, I mean I've only played 7, 8, 9, 10, 10 2, 12, and 13. So out of all of those, the only two that I put below it are 10, 2, and 8.
Okay.
Yeah.
Corbin's just getting ready to take a flight to Georgia.
No, because I actually didn't expound on that from me. I think the ones that I finished, let's see, I did 6, 7, half of 8, never touched 9, did 10, 10 2, didn't touch 12, 13, obviously, 13 2, never touched 13 3. The time thing kind of turned me off on that one. 14 played for 2 or 3 years. And then 15 actually right now is in my backlog.
And to be clear, I did say that I played these games, not that I have beaten them, because that we're not going to talk about that list right now.
Okay, there's a difference there.
Yeah.
It's okay, though. Difference. I feel like even if you haven't beaten a Final Fantasy, you get the gist by hour 10 or so. So if you've at least sunk more than the introduction into the game, then I feel like you have a general idea of if you're going to enjoy it or not, right?
Oh, yes, definitely.
As far as it goes for me and where Final Fantasy XIII falls, I feel like of the three of us, I've probably got the most exposure. I don't think there's a Final Fantasy game that I've missed. I don't really count 11 and 14 in my list just because the MMO style was much different. Not that they're less of a Final Fantasy game. It just, they play differently. So I don't include them typically in a which Final Fantasy is your favorite kind of thing. But everybody knows what my number one is at this point. I harp about it and talk about it so much that if you don't know, then you really have not been listening. But I think that 13 probably falls right at number 5 for me, maybe a little lower, just depending. It's kind of middle of the pack, and it really just depends on how I'm looking at the list. But, I think of my top 4 before it at least, and 10 is obviously number 1. I think the next one on the list would probably be 6 as well. And then I actually, for number 3 and 4, would be Final Fantasy IV and Final Fantasy 15. I loved Dude Bros Adventures. It was so it was so fun.
I am actually interested in seeing how Noctis is with that game. It's definitely up there that I need to complete immediately.
If you're not playing anything right now, I mean, you gotta. I mean, it's so good. It's probably in my top 3 in one of the very few Final Fantasy games that I ever actually finished.
All right. Well, I would have to pose a question to you. If you had to compare 15 to one of the ones that you finished, what would it be similar to?
Nothing. It's
nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing. Okay.
Yeah, it really does. It stands on its own 2 feet, and there's something to be said about when you play a Final Fantasy game and you get party members that kind of come and go along the way. Like there's relationship building there, but it's not quite the same as what you get when you start 15 up with these 4 characters that just never leave. The amount of affection that grows as you play this game is just, I mean, it's remarkable.
Yeah, and it's not just that, but think about this. You get just these 4 guys, and they never get old. Even some of them have little catchphrases like Iggy's, I've come up with a new recipe, which still doesn't get old. And you hear it hundreds and hundreds of times, but there's just something so charming about that game that makes it so good. You really, really need to play it. It's so unique on its own.
You got me sold. That's high praise.
All right. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our episode. I am really happy that we covered this one. And Corbin, I'm super glad that we were able to get you on for this episode. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your knowledge and all of the little tidbits that we got along the way. You really shed some light on a lot of things that I don't think I even knew going into this.
I'm glad you guys really you asked me for this episode. I told you at the beginning of the episode, if you would have told me 10 years out there I'm finished this game, that I'd be doing a podcast. My first one would be, what is a podcast? And the second one would be, why am I recording my voice? I'm really happy that I could come in and step in. And when you guys do Final Fantasy XIII, which is going to come out in a couple of years, I'll be back if you want me.
Yeah, definitely. If people are looking to connect with you on the interwebs, where can they find you, Corbin?
I am on the Discord server. It's Pylon567. And then on Twitter, you can find me at CorbyCorb12. If you go into Peter's friends list, you'll see me. I'm probably show up in his mentions a couple different times. But you guys can always just kind of chime in and talk to me at any point in time about any games.
That's right. Right now, we're discussing my month-to-month computer build.
Oh, yeah. We did a podcast on that one there.
Right. And Cody, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for sitting alongside of me and co-hosting the Deep Base podcast.
You're welcome, buddy.
I nearly forgot it again, but just as a reminder, if you want to answer the question of the episode or just want to come by and chat with us and see how we're doing and talk some video games, you can reach us at Deep Base Podcast on Twitter, or you can drop by our Discord, which is brand new and it's popping and everybody loves Cody there and not me. You can find that at discord.deepbasepodcast.com.
That's going to change this episode. I guarantee it.
We'll see. All right, guys. And with that, we are going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for listening. We will see you guys in 2 weeks for the next episode, and we'll catch you then. Have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.
Peter, what's your number 2?
Well, that was abrupt.
Hey, Peter, what's your number 2?
Are you mad because I just shit all over your last song? No, I'm just kidding.
Hey, it's not my song. It's not on my list.
That's
okay?
right.
I don't know what you're talking about.
You're right. I wasn't shitting on your song. I was shitting on your opinion, which is better.